I want to take you into a zone unlike any other. A place where light fades, darkness flows in, time loses all sense, and action causes reaction. As Rod Sterling would say, you're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Shattered Throne.
I'm happy to announce that I'm now a part of Advanced GG. I fell in love with their products, and I honestly think you will too, if you use my code 300. Why 300, you may ask? Well, Advanced said that if we get 300 code uses on the code 300, they would make us a brand new shaker. And I will be giving those away like candy if that happens. So use code 300 for 30% off. Yes, you heard that correctly. 30% off your order of Advanced GG, and let's make this shaker happen. Thank you guys so much for all the support. And if you want to support this, please go check out the link in the description and enjoy the video. To start Dreaming City month on the channel, let's begin with arguably the most iconic activity in the Dreaming City, Last Wish. The Last Wish raid was by far the hardest day one experience for players racing, with only 2 teams coming out of that 24-hour raid and 1 team missing the window by 2 minutes. Last Wish solidified an already fantastic DLC as the best time the game had ever seen. But with the action of beating the raid came the reaction of today's video. You see, while Last Wish may be the most iconic portion of the Dreaming City, that is only a half truth. The Shattered Throne is that other half. Because while Last Wish was a 6-player raid, the Shattered Throne was Destiny's first ever 3-player dungeon. And while Last Wish's completion by Team Redeem set off a chain reaction that unlocked content like missions, activities, maps, and even more content, the Shattered Throne is the one piece of content unlocked that still has the Dreaming City in a state of a perpetual curse. We were fooled is an understatement. Even more of an understatement is the sheer quality that this dungeon has and the sheer amount of community love for this activity. To go a step beyond, this dungeon still directly influences the story of Destiny 2. Even as recent as Season of the Lost, with Queen Marasov returning to fix the curse that had forsaken the Dreaming City. So, my dear viewer, I want to properly serve this dungeon the story it deserves. I want to welcome you to the Shattered Throne. On September 4th, Reddit user Crambled Eggs discovered something fascinating in the Dreaming City. If a player were to use a tincture of Queen's Foil, an item gained from opening chests in the Dreaming City, that player could see platforms appearing in spots they never saw before. Whole secrets spread throughout the city, including faster ways to move around the city. Hold on to that last part for one moment. Let's fast forward to the day the curse was struck upon the Dreaming City, September 15th. Not only was the community in love with all of the content that came with this day, but the community also didn't know what they were in for. As Wesley Yinpool of Eurogamer said in his article on the topic, quote, "There's always a greater power, isn't there?" The article mentions how there was new content, but no mention of the Shattered Throne. mention of how the Dreaming City's look changed, but no mention of the brand new dungeon. That is because even the dungeon was kept a secret from the player base. While the curse was brought upon the Dreaming City on September 15th, it would take until September 25th for the Destiny community to discover where to even start this new activity. As it turned out, it was in front of their faces the whole time. Through Harbinger's Seclude and down under an elevator hidden in the corner was a teleporter a player could find, which warped them into a safe and secluded place in the Dreaming City. This area was known as the Confluence, and it had teleporters to different portions of the Dreaming City, acting as a sort of in-game fast travel system beside the other in-game fast travel system. We said this room had teleporters, and one giant room that had seemingly no purpose. This place normally has nothing to offer aside from a hidden chest for popping a tincture of Queen's Foil. But when the Dreaming City had a curse put on it, this wall turned into a full-on portal to another realm. On September 25th, the highest point of the curse became the highest point of Forsaken for the Destiny community, and the walls of the Shattered Throne were finally opened. The opening encounter to the Shattered Throne is one about memory and placement. In this low-lit, macabre setting, the Dreaming City became a full-on nightmare. The towers that once overlooked the city became desolate, bare, and, well, shattered. The atmosphere went from this bright and beautiful aesthetic to cold and eerie. Erebus had the symbols from the Last Wish raid, and after defeating each major enemy, a new random symbol appeared for you to go and find. The plates behind each area were the player's cue to find where to next, but it was easy to get lost in Erebus simply because the layout had verticality as much as it had snipers and enemies to push you off the cliff. Once all the enemies were defeated, the final captain remained where you first started. And after killing him, the vault door swung open and you were plunged into the next challenge. Now, you may be wondering, what is this place and why are we here? Well, the Shattered Throne is where Queen Mara Sov made her throne world with the help of Riven of 1000 Voices. And it was to be used as a safe place, especially after Oryx quite literally killed her in the Taken King. As I'm sure there are videos out there going over all of this in much better detail than I can describe, just know that this used to be a safe place for the Queen of the Awoken, and now it's been reduced to just broken pieces, just like our next encounters. The Descent is the beginning of the in-between encounters, but don't be fooled. This was no easy task for players, especially considering that the dungeon was power level 590 on release. That's right, this dungeon was harder than the Last Wish raid in terms of players leveling. The cap on leveling for Forsaken was power level 600, and I want to put it into context so you know how insane this achievement truly was. There was no artifact to boost your level. There wasn't a ton of resources to gain levels either. So this meant that the Shattered Throne, giving the highest level drops named Pinnacle drops, gave players levels and incentive to be in this really difficult dungeon for long periods of time. This to me is the pinnacle of what challenge looked like, and the Descent made getting that pinnacle loot much more difficult. To start, the players had to drop down into pits of enemies and work their way up to a Taken Captain Major with 2 invisible Minotaurs guarding it, and sniper vandals shooting from a distance the whole time. Once a player was able to climb up the stairs and up to the captain, the room ahead was nothing short of an overflowing encompass of enemies to deal with. Crossing this thin bridge would mean dealing with tons of snipers and area of effect fire on the ground, but what made things worse were the phalanxes with shields sending a player off the ledge or backwards. After players made it through part 1 of the descent, part 2 had the player met with narrow pathways and ogres shooting you to knock you off, blights in the way causing your pathing trouble. Now, this bridge may look familiar to you if you're familiar with the game Dark Souls. Make no mistake, this isn't a game journalist comparing every game to Dark Souls. This is Bungie taking a page straight out of Dark Souls and Orlando, and I absolutely love this concept for Destiny 2. Platforming past these ogres is always a risky game, and especially with how strong they were and the ride to even get back to this spot, the archers from Anne Orlando, the ogres from the Shattered Throne, both share in the misery they cause and the triumph you feel from finally moving past them. Moving past that, there are the final 2 portions of the descent, one being known as the Thrallway. This area is infamous in Destiny 2, but for day 1, this area was a cluster of thrall being thrown at you, your speed being reduced to almost none, health regeneration stopping entirely, and to top it all off, you were underleveled here if you did this on day 1. The Thrallway pits players in an obstacle very different from the rooms before, because while in those rooms a player could sit back and snipe, the Thrallway made it so you were constantly being rushed with little to no room to breathe. This nuance and encounter variety is what set the Shattered Throne apart from everything else in Destiny 2. After the Thrallway was bested, the next area had this giant door with no access to it, but we'll get to that room later. Some rocks to jump on, and some more phalanxes to set the player back. But after that, we meet our first boss. Vorgeth is legendary in Destiny history for 2 main reasons. Vorgeth required the player to kill 4 wizards spread through the room, acquire their petitioner's buff, and then dunk the buff into a chamber to drop this boss's shield and damage it. The problems for players were the wizards being a menace to deal with, the vandals shielding the wizards, and the goblins shielding those vandals, and of course, Vorgeth shooting the player the whole time. Keep in mind that a player only had 45 seconds to handle each buff, and if the timer ran out, they were dead. With all the stalling the ads did, the boss's attack which pushed the player back away from everything, and the difficulty of this dungeon being 590 power, that made this room a haunted hell. To top it off, if you did dunk the buff, the boss's attack was tracking orbs to be shot at the player, so that interrupted an already tight window for damage further. This boss would be at the center of players claiming the dungeon was too hard, that the boss was unfair, and for those willing to attempt the solo of this dungeon for an emblem, this was the heartbreaker for the runs. Did I also mention there were no rally flags to get full ammo and abilities? Yeah, this boss was what defined the difficulty of the Shattered Throne, but we still have another half to go. After all that struggle, and once players did eventually beat Vorgeth, the doors open to another Dark Souls-like homage. Like beating Ornstein and Smo, there was a statue to present you an award for your trouble. Now, this wasn't Guinevere talking about chests and lord vessels. This was instead Sir Ido presenting a quest for the bow in the statue's hands. More on that quest a bit later into the video. Now that the first half of the Shattered Throne was over, it was time for players to bask in the darkness, look up in the sky, and see that tower that they had seen since the beginning of the Shattered Throne, and enjoy a trip up the tower. From the beginning of the Shattered Throne, there had been one room staring at you the whole time. This tower, this window, an enemy inside. Now, it was time to climb up. The first obstacle, a knight with plenty of adds around. The second, taken captains blocking your path. The third, an infinite spawning thrallway. The mad dash continued. Next was a shorter version of the ogre room, this time with phalanxes instead of ogres, but the same rules applied, except if you were going to get thrown off, it didn't mean death. It meant a longer climb back up the tower. Even more insane, the Taken Boop wall shortly after. This was a wall with Taken hobgoblins and a gauntlet of pushing from the Taken Boops. The platform had the player hugging the wall and moving as fast as possible, and almost no opportunity to revive a teammate if they died. Once through this mad dash up the tower, the lifts led you to the source of the curse in the Dreaming City, looking away from you with 3 knights guarding it. Dul Incaru, the Eternal Return. Dul Incaru, guarded by 3 Taken Darkblades and sporting a very unique aesthetic, was the source of the curse in the Dreaming City. Well, sort of. We don't truly know what to trust. We just know that Dul Incaru is the reason for the Shattered Throne's cycle. In this quote-unquote loop, Dul Incaru must be defeated, or the cycle will continue again. More on that cycle and if it will be broken later into the video. But for now, just know that this was why the Shattered Throne was only available once a month for the players. And for now, know that this boss was way less of a challenge gameplay wise, as this boss remains a challenge story wise. Incaru had the player needing to kill the knights to acquire the finite thought buff to even damage the boss. Now, Incaru may not have had a lot of health, but if the player didn't kill this wizard in the time allotted, a crystal appeared for the player to break, and the well in the middle was needed to cleanse. Once Dul Incaru was killed for now, that was the end of the Shattered Throne. Or so you would think. Remember that statue? Remember the 1 week per month this dungeon could be attempted? Remember why Vorgeth was also annoying? And do you remember not even being able to select this dungeon from the directory? Well, I didn't mention that last part before, but what I will say for the rest is that this is the section we explore these topics. So let's begin with the loot. There wasn't anything exclusive to this dungeon unless you count pinnacle power levels or this ship. This ship we'll get into more detail about in another video, but just know that it was a huge part of the struggle for Destiny 2's most iconic seal, Cursebreaker. Think about it like this. A player only had 3 attempts at the dungeon per month, and the ship was the rare drop from the dungeon. So that meant you only had 3 chances per month to get this ship to drop. Like I said, we'll talk about Cursebreaker more in a larger video about the Dreaming City, so stay tuned for that. But another part of Cursebreaker was the amount of Ascendant eggs and Ahamkara bones that were in the Shattered Throne. For the bones needed a tincture of Queensfoil to see the steps to gain them. For the eggs needed a certain weapon to break them. The first bone was on the top of the symbol rooms in the first encounter. The second, across an Ascendant bridge at the beginning of the descent. The third, off to the right of the Ogre room. And the final one, all the way across this empty space and through a tough bridge in the room before Vorgeth. A player without the tincture of Queensfoil would think that you were cheating, but if you had it, platforms would just appear. These bones were nothing more than lore and needed for a title, but the hunt for them was new to the player base, that it really didn't need any other incentive to get players excited. Titles used to be a massive deal in Destiny. They were new, and having one meant that you could show off the amount of time investment that you put in. Nowadays, there's a lot of titles, and there's a lot of reasons to get different titles. But back then, this was an entirely new concept, and players were excited to show off the amount of work they put into the game. Now, on to the eggs. Remember the statue of Shur Ido? Well, after speaking to this statue, the community was confused for a little bit. But one user on Reddit named Hotson found a secret quest in the Four-Horn Gulch on the Tangled Shore. This area being another new area to Destiny 2. A player who played Forsaken may have noticed this room at the back of Four-Horn Gulch, but had no clue what the point of it was. Well, this mission sought to not only take you there, but show you why it was a refresher at how beautiful the Dreaming City's aesthetic was. This mission had the player taking out a captain, a centurion, and then a minotaur. After the mission was beaten, the player received 3 tokens to enter the Shattered Throne again, this time with a whole different set of objectives and secrets to uncover. For starters, a player would need to grab an orb from the dragon room on top of it and dunk the ball into a missing orb statue in the center of Erebus and the Shattered Throne. This spawned not 1, but 2 minotaurs to fight. After the player conquered these, it charged one of the 3 tokens. Now the next challenge was in 2 parts. Part 1 was in the Anne Orlando inspired ogre room on the back side of one of the statues, where an orb sat to grab and then dunk on the far right side of the room. And that second part would be on the right side of the thrallway, grabbing an orb and moving through the halls with that orb, then dunking it on the statue at the exit of the thrallway. Remember that door that I talked about that was sealed? Well, doing this actually unlocked that door, and inside this gigantic Colosseum-like room was a taken captain to fight after waves of taken enemies. But there was also a catch here. If your team died and didn't beat this captain, it meant you had to start over the entire dungeon. Oh, and there was no checkpoint resetting back then either, so some people were definitely upset. After this boss was defeated, the final token needed to be charged, and this is where Vorgeth comes back into play. After beating the 4 wizards in Vorgeth's room, an invisible minotaur crept into the back of the room. If a player were to take this minotaur out, an arc charge would spawn, and all you had to do was dunk it into another statue's hands in the room, this time spawning a baby Vorgeth while the other Vorgeth shot at you too. Take this smaller version out and then defeat Vorgeth again to fully charge all 3 tokens. After all is said and done, the statue of Shur Ido presented the player with Forsaken's advertised wall hack bow, Wish Ender. This bow sounds great, and there was even a bug in the Season of the Dawn that made this bow do a lot more damage than intended. I mean, if you look at it, it's big enough to be considered a Dragon Rider bow from the game Dark Souls, but instead, it was mostly used as a gimmick to just shoot the eggs in the Dreaming City for the Cursebreaker title. I'm still hoping for a buff to this one down the line, but for now, that's all Wish Ender is. So that is the loot the Shattered Throne had to offer, and I didn't even include the hidden random chests throughout the dungeon, because I think after watching this video, you should go look for those yourself. But I am also missing a major chunk of this dungeon story, and it goes further than lore. It dives into community, and the foundation of what this channel was built on, community stories. So let's talk about those and the story of what remains to be done with the Shattered Throne. Well, it's not a surprise to say that the Shattered Throne is rich in atmosphere and lore. But even richer may be the community side of the lore and buying the lies a book can tell them to jump in here. If you're unfamiliar with the story, Bagel 4K was the first player to reach power level 999 a year after the Shattered Throne released, and this made national gaming headlines. Even more because it was told in the book that if a player were to solo the dungeon with a blue fusion rifle in hand at this power level, that the curse would be broken. And so Bagel did just that, grinding XP, turning in bounties, doing everything he could so the community could see the curse be lifted. And it didn't do anything except inspire me to make YouTube videos on community stories and force Bungie's hand to make an apology letter to Bagel in the voice of Savathun. All I can say is thank you, Bagel, for giving me the opportunity to cover your story. Forever a legend. Also legendary, the amount of insane speedruns this dungeon has seen, with some of the coolest tricks in all of speedrunning utilized to pull off incredibly low times. Maybe we'll have to cover this side of the throne one day, but I highly encourage you to check out some of these speedruns. I mean, what you're seeing on screen is just insane. Well, now we have to look at the current season of Destiny 2, Season of the Lost, where the Shattered Throne has become nothing more than a fun dungeon to play, a place where you hope to get reprised Dreaming City loot, and a place where people can get insane power levels by scripting their game for XP in the Thrallway. Let's talk about Season 15 specifically though. I believe in Season 15, Wish 15 will come true and the Dreaming City's curse will be broken. Queen Marasov has returned with the promise to break the Dreaming City's curse, and Savathun is the confirmed villain of the Witch Queen. The season takes place in the Dreaming City as well, leading me to believe there's much to be done with Dul Incaru and the Shattered Throne as a whole. If Ahamkaras do work in bargains, and if Riven's heart has been taken by the Techians, that means the bargain of the Dreaming City's curse being lifted may end up with the Witch Queen gaining the light. If there's any more evidence of this, look at the new activity to the game, the Shattered Realm, which fits the very same aesthetic as the Shattered Throne. With the curse being promised to be broken, the symbols appearing in the realm, does this mean the 15th wish will be proven? Does this mean that Dul Incaru will finally die? For now, all we can do is wait. But waiting is something I also fear for this dungeon as well. Bungie's Justin Truman has gone on to state that locations like the Dreaming City may be getting sunset, and if the curse is truly to be broken, then that means sunsetting the Shattered Throne and the Dreaming City is almost inevitable. I hope sunsetting of the Shattered Throne doesn't happen, as to me, this is the dungeon that changed the game, and will always hold a special place in my heart. Killing Dul Incaru with a Whisper of the Worm for the first time, Ikelos shotgunning Vorgeth for the first time. It all just feels so ripe in my memory. I guess if we're to look at the silver linings, this would give Bungie a reason to reprise the Shattered Throne with proper loot, and make it the dungeon we all remembered in terms of challenge again. Anyways, if that day ever comes, and if the curse is truly to be broken, if sunsetting of this activity does happen, let the memory of the Shattered Throne live through this video. I will see you all next time, or on Twitch. Have a good day, everyone.
Let's go! Get out of my face! Get out of my face, bro!
Go flawless and I'll gift 10 subs. Boys. Boys.
Coast seems clear.